After my father's funeral, my ruthless stepdad demanded I hand over my $30 million inheritance to his son for a business venture. When I refused, he slapped me hard across the face in front of his son, leaving me terrified. But little did he know, I was concocting a revenge plan that would leave him in shock the very next day. My name is Nancy, and I'm a 21-year-old college student living in Dallas, Texas. I never thought that the happiest moment of my life would turn into the most challenging. When my father passed away unexpectedly, he left me a fortune, $30 million, to be exact. This money was supposed to secure my future, to be my safety net in a world that often felt uncertain. But now, it felt more like a burden than a blessing. I lived with my mother, Sarah, a loving woman in her early 40s who had always been my rock. Since my father's death, she had struggled to hold everything together. My father had been her first love, and losing him shattered her heart. I often saw her sitting alone, lost in thought, a distant look in her eyes as she reminisced about the life they had built together. In the chaos of grief, she married Samuel, my stepfather, who was in his mid-40s. Samuel had been in our lives for 7 years, but our relationship was strained. He was charming at first, but as time went on, his true colors began to show. Samuel seemed to care more about his image than about me or my mother. There was a distance between us that felt like an invisible wall. He often made snide remarks about my choices and my future, and it made me uncomfortable. I tried to keep things peaceful for my mother's sake, but it was exhausting. Then there was Eric, my stepbrother, also 21. He and I shared a friendly but distant relationship. We would occasionally hang out, but I could never shake the feeling that he was more aligned with Samuel than with me. I sensed that he wanted to impress his father, and that made me wary of him. Everything changed dramatically one afternoon. Samuel barged into my room, a serious look on his face that immediately put me on edge. "Nancy, we need to talk," he said, his voice low and commanding.
About what?
I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "About your inheritance," he replied, crossing his arms. My stomach dropped. "What about it?" "I think it's only fair that you give the entire amount to Eric," he declared. "He wants to start his own business, and he needs the funds." I was taken aback. "You can't be serious. That money was left to me by my father. It's meant to secure my future." Samuel scoffed. "You're young. You don't know how to manage that kind of money. Eric has plans, and he needs your help." I felt a rush of anger. "You don't know what my father intended. That money is mine, and I refuse to give it to Eric for some vague business idea." Samuel's expression darkened. "You think you can just ignore your family's needs? You're being selfish." "Selfish? This is about my future. I'm protecting my father's legacy," I snapped back, feeling the tension in the air. But Samuel wasn't done. He stepped closer, his voice lowering to a menacing whisper. "You'll give that money to Eric. It's for the best." Before I could react, he raised his hand and slapped me hard across the face. The sting echoed in my ears, and I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks. Eric stood in the doorway, wide-eyed and shocked. I wanted to cry out, to fight back, but all I could do was stare at Samuel, stunned by his aggression.
"Get out."
I managed to choke out. "You have no right to do this to me." Samuel smirked, the satisfaction clear on his face. "I'll give you some time to think about it," he said, turning on his heel and leaving the room. I felt a mix of humiliation and fury wash over me. I didn't understand how a man who had been welcomed into our home could act this way. After that confrontation, I felt like my world was crumbling. I didn't know who to trust anymore. My own stepfather was trying to manipulate me, using Eric as a pawn in his game. I spent hours trying to process what had happened, replaying our argument in my head. The next few days were filled with anxiety. I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was going on beneath the surface. Samuel's sudden demand for my inheritance felt too calculated, too sinister. I decided I needed to dig deeper into his activities. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I began my investigation. I started by searching through Samuel's things, looking for clues that might reveal his true intentions. I rifled through papers in his office, searching for anything that could provide insight into his financial dealings. Days turned into a blur of research and sleepless nights. I uncovered emails between Samuel and a woman named Lisa. They talked about something shady, discussing terms that made my stomach churn. The word cryptocurrency appeared frequently, along with mentions of investments that seemed far too risky. I knew I was onto something, but I needed more evidence. I had to be careful, though. If Samuel discovered what I was doing, I could be putting myself in even more danger. With my heart racing, I decided to confront him. I had to know if he was hiding something. "Samuel," I said one evening, trying to keep my voice steady, "what do you really know about Eric's business plans?" He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" "I've been hearing things," I pressed. "Things that make me question your intentions." Samuel's expression hardened. "You're being paranoid. Eric has a good idea, and he needs your support." "I don't think this is just about support," I replied, feeling a surge of courage. "If you're trying to manipulate me, I won't let you." He leaned in closer, his voice low and threatening. "You don't know what you're getting into, Nancy. This is family business, and you need to stay out of it." I felt a chill run down my spine, but I held my ground. I had to protect my father's legacy. As I left the room, I knew I was at a turning point. I couldn't just sit back and allow Samuel to control my life. I needed to gather more evidence to expose whatever secrets he was hiding. The battle was just beginning, and I was determined to come out on top. Days turned into a whirlwind of emotions and sleepless nights. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, with my stepfather, Samuel, at the center of it all, pulling strings I couldn't see. The slap he had delivered echoed in my mind, a painful reminder that he would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. I couldn't let him manipulate me any longer. Determined to uncover the truth, I turned my focus to Samuel's shady dealings. I spent every spare moment gathering evidence, piecing together the puzzle of his life. It felt like being a detective in my own home, and I was both exhilarated and terrified. My mother, Sarah, was often distracted by her own grief, lost in thoughts of my father. I didn't want to burden her with my suspicions just yet. She had enough to deal with. One evening, while scrolling through Samuel's emails, I stumbled upon something that sent chills down my spine. There was an email thread discussing a cryptocurrency scheme that seemed highly illegal. Samuel and Lisa were making plans to launch a business that involved laundering money through fake investments. I couldn't believe my eyes. How could he do this? And why involve Eric? I quickly printed the emails, knowing that I had to keep everything discreet. If Samuel discovered what I was doing, it could end badly for me. I stored the papers in a safe place in my room, where I could easily access them later. I needed a plan to expose him, but I didn't know how to proceed. That night, I decided to confront Eric. I thought maybe he would be more open to the truth than his father. If he could see that Samuel was lying, perhaps he would help me expose him. I found him in the living room, engrossed in a video game. "Hey, Eric," I said, trying to sound casual. "Hey, Nancy. What's up?" He paused the game and looked up at me. "I wanted to talk about your dad," I started, carefully choosing my words. "I've been hearing things about his business. I think he might be involved in something illegal." Eric raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "What are you talking about?" "Just things I've found." "I think he's trying to use my inheritance for a cryptocurrency scheme," I confessed, holding my breath for his reaction. He looked thoughtful, but I could see uncertainty in his eyes. "Dad wouldn't do that. He's just trying to help us." "Help us?" I replied, incredulous. "He wants to take my money, Eric. You have to understand that this isn't just about family. It's about the law." "I don't believe you," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "Why not? You've seen how he acts." I insisted. "If you care about our family at all, you need to look deeper." Before Eric could respond, Samuel appeared in the doorway, a dark look on his face. "What's going on here?" he demanded, interrupting our conversation. "Nothing," Eric mumbled, shifting uncomfortably. "Are you sure?" Samuel narrowed his eyes, glancing between us. "Nancy, you're not causing trouble, are you?" I could feel the tension rising. "I'm just trying to protect what's mine, Samuel," I said, meeting his gaze. You should be the one worried about the trouble you're causing. Samuel stepped closer, his expression threatening. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're out of your depth. I held my ground, refusing to back down. I won't let you bully me, Samuel. This is my inheritance, and I'm not giving it to you or anyone else. With that, I turned and walked away, heart pounding. I needed to act quickly. I couldn't rely on Eric's support. I returned to my room, frustration boiling inside me. I felt completely alone, but I was also determined to uncover the truth. As the days passed, I became more resolute in my quest for justice. I reached out to a trusted friend from college, Jessica, who was studying law. We met at a coffee shop, and I poured out my story to her, revealing everything I had found. Wow, Nancy, this is serious, Jessica said, her eyes wide. You need to gather all your evidence and find a lawyer who can help you. Exactly, I agreed, relief flooding through me. I've already printed the emails, but I need more proof. I want to expose him for what he really is. Jessica nodded, her expression serious. Let's make a plan. We can go through everything you've got and figure out how to proceed. After our meeting, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. With Jessica's help, I began collecting everything I could find related to Samuel's dealings. I searched his office, going through files and documents, looking for any sign of wrongdoing. Each discovery fueled my determination. One evening, while rummaging through his papers, I stumbled upon a folder labeled Investments. Inside were spreadsheets filled with numbers and names I didn't recognize. My heart raced as I scanned the documents, quickly realizing they contained information on multiple cryptocurrency accounts and suspicious transactions. I had struck gold. This was the evidence I needed to show Samuel for who he truly was. With shaking hands, I took pictures of the documents on my phone, ensuring I had backup copies. I knew I needed to act fast. Samuel could easily destroy them if he found out. As I headed back to my room, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. I was finally getting closer to the truth, but I was also stepping into dangerous territory. Samuel was cunning, and I had to be careful. I couldn't let him know what I was planning. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. But in that moment, I also felt a glimmer of hope. I was fighting back, and I was determined to protect my father's legacy at all costs. With my evidence collected, I knew it was time to take action. I reached out to Jessica again, eager to share my findings. We met at the coffee shop, the familiar aroma of coffee mixed with my anxiety. I couldn't help but feel like I was walking a tightrope, balancing between my desire for justice and the fear of what Samuel might do if he discovered my plan. Jessica, I found something huge, I said, sliding the folder across the table. This is all the documentation on Samuel's cryptocurrency dealings. He's involved in some serious illegal activities. Jessica's eyes widened as she sifted through the pages. This is incredible, Nancy. With this evidence, we can approach a lawyer. We can file a lawsuit and make sure he pays for what he's done. The adrenaline surged through me. Finally, I was taking control of my life. I want to set up a meeting with a lawyer who specializes in financial crimes, I said. But I need to be careful. If Samuel catches wind of this, I could be in danger. I understand, Jessica replied, her voice steady. We'll keep this under wraps until we have everything lined up. As we finalized our plans, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease settling in my stomach. I had to confront my stepfather soon, but I wanted it to be on my terms, with solid evidence backing me up. After our meeting, I began to prepare for the next steps. I reached out to a lawyer named Mr. Thompson, known for his expertise in handling cases involving financial fraud. After a few anxious days, we scheduled a meeting at his office. Walking into the sleek building downtown felt surreal. The walls were adorned with art, and the air was filled with the scent of polished wood. Mr. Thompson welcomed me with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. I'm glad you came, Nancy. Let's get right into it. As I shared my story and handed him the evidence I had gathered, I could see the wheels turning in his mind. This is very serious, he said, studying the documents closely. If what you're saying is true, We can build a strong case against your stepfather and his accomplices." The gravity of his words washed over me. "I just want to protect my father's legacy," I admitted, my voice shaking. "Samuel thinks he can manipulate me, but I won't let him." Mr. Thompson nodded. "We'll make sure he understands the consequences of his actions." As we discussed strategies, I felt a sense of empowerment blooming within me. For so long, I had been a victim of Samuel's manipulation, but now I was taking charge. I couldn't help but imagine how it would feel to expose him, to finally show my mother the truth about the man she married. The plan was set in motion. Mr. Thompson advised me to keep my findings confidential and to avoid any direct confrontation with Samuel until we were ready to present our case. I agreed, knowing that this was crucial for my safety. That evening, as I walked home, I replayed the day's events in my mind. The tension in the air felt thick, and I could sense that a storm was brewing. Samuel was becoming more unpredictable, and I could only imagine how he would react when he discovered I was not backing down. Arriving home, I found Eric in the living room, a distraction from my thoughts. "Hey, Nancy," he called, glancing up from his phone. "What's up?" "Not much," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Just studying." He nodded but then added, "Is everything okay with you and Dad? He's been acting weird lately." I hesitated, considering how much to reveal. "Just some family stuff," I said vaguely. Eric looked concerned, but didn't push further. "If you need to talk, I'm here," he offered, his tone sincere. "Thanks, Eric," I said, forcing a smile. But inside, I knew this was bigger than our family drama. It was about justice and protecting my father's legacy. As I climbed into bed that night, I felt a mix of hope and apprehension. The battle was just beginning, and I was ready to fight. The day of the courtroom showdown arrived, and I felt a mix of excitement and dread swirling inside me. I had prepared for this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, I couldn't shake the anxiety creeping into my thoughts. My heart raced as I arrived at the courthouse, a towering building that loomed over me like the weight of my circumstances. Jessica met me outside, her presence a comforting reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. "You've got this, Nancy," she said, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Just stay focused on the evidence, and remember why you're doing this." As we stepped into the courthouse, the air was thick with tension. The waiting area was filled with people, some anxious, others hopeful. I spotted Samuel and Eric seated together, their expressions a mix of arrogance and discomfort. Samuel had always carried himself with an air of confidence, but today he seemed unnerved. Perhaps he sensed that the walls were closing in. When our case was called, I felt my heart pound in my chest. The courtroom was imposing, with a judge seated high above everyone else, looking down with an expression of authority. I took a deep breath, clutching the folder containing all the evidence I had gathered. This was it, my moment to reclaim my life. Mr. Thompson stood beside me, his presence grounding. "You'll do great," he whispered as we approached the plaintiff's table. The proceedings began, and the judge addressed the court. "We are here today to address allegations of financial fraud and manipulation. Ms. Nancy, you may present your case." As I took the stand, I felt the weight of my father's legacy resting on my shoulders. "My name is Nancy, and I'm here to expose my stepfather's deceit," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Samuel has been using my inheritance to fund illegal activities, including a cryptocurrency scheme." I could feel the eyes of the courtroom on me, curious, skeptical, supportive. I continued, detailing the events that led me here, emphasizing the abuse I endured at Samuel's hands. I handed over the printed emails and financial documents to the judge. These emails show the discussions between Samuel and his accomplice, Lisa. They're plotting to launder money through fake investments. Samuel's expression shifted from confidence to disbelief as the evidence unfolded. "Objection," he shouted, trying to regain control. "This is all hearsay." Mr. Thompson stood firm. "Your Honor, these documents are verifiable evidence of the defendant's illegal activities." The judge nodded, allowing the evidence to be presented. I watched as Samuel's facade crumbled. His bravado evaporated, revealing the man behind the mask, one who had exploited my family's trust for his own gain. Next, it was Eric's turn to testify. I didn't know what he would say, but I hoped he'd finally see the truth. As he stepped onto the stand, I held my breath. "I've been confused about my dad's business," he admitted, glancing at Samuel. "I thought he was just trying to help Nancy, but now I see things differently." Samuel shot him a furious look, but Eric continued. "I don't want to be part of this anymore. I support Nancy." The room fell silent. It was a pivotal moment, one that shifted the tide in my favor. I could see Samuel's anger boiling over as he realized he was losing control not just of the situation but also of his son. As the trial progressed, I felt a growing sense of hope. With every piece of evidence, it became clear that Samuel's manipulation was about to unravel. When the judge announced a recess, I stepped outside with Jessica, my heart racing. "We're going to win this, aren't we?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. Jessica smiled, her confidence infectious. "You've done everything right, Nancy. Just wait for the verdict." When we returned to the courtroom, the tension was palpable. The judge returned, looking grave. "After reviewing the evidence and testimonies presented, I have come to a decision." I held my breath, waiting for the words that would change my life. "Samuel, Eric, and Lisa are found guilty of financial fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering." I felt a rush of relief wash over me. Samuel's face twisted in shock and anger, while Eric looked utterly defeated. The judge continued,